Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, you will no longer fear death. My guest today is Julie McFadden, BSN RN, a hospice palliative care nurse with a huge following on TikTok and YouTube. This is Hospice Nurse Julie. I have been watching her videos for a couple of years now to learn from her perspective as a 15-year veteran registered nurse in hospice and palliative care. She is one of the most compassionate people you'll ever meet in healthcare, not to mention impassioned about normalizing death and dying. Her book is a New York Times bestseller. The book is called Nothing to Fear, Demystifying Death to Live More Fully. And you'll find out that she's had her own share of unexplained positive experiences around death and dying. There's a lot you can learn here. I absolutely adore her book. And now, Carefree and Conscious, you will no longer fear death. You have nothing to fear. Julie McFadden, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's a thrill to have you because this is a subject that's really close to my heart, which is helping alleviate the fear of death and having an understanding and even, if you will, a celebration around the transition that happens. But I know a lot of people are concerned because they have a loved one who's recently passed. Maybe they saw something in their passing that concerned them, or they're taking care of an elderly loved one now, and they're worried, what's it going to be like? Will they pass when I leave the room? I mean, there's so many fears around that and so many things that I want to get into. But I guess we have to go one thing at a time, although I have to say I'm excited to hold this book in my hands.
Thank
Nothing
you.
to Fear is the book, listeners. Nothing to Fear. And I know I haven't even let Julie say anything yet, but I'm afraid I'm gonna forget to say this. Buy the book and hold it in your hands, because as a very sensitive person, there is a vibration with this book. There's so many helpful, hopeful, and healing things in it, and holding it in your hand, I think, really drives it home. Okay, I really front-loaded this interview, huh?
Yeah, that's amazing. That makes me feel really happy to hear that from someone who can like feel things. That makes me really happy. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. And I think I want to start there. I want to start with how sensitive you are and go back to the hospice origin story for you. You're up to your eyeballs in the ICU, which the
Yes.
goal there is to keep people alive at, whatever measures have to be taken. Could you walk us through, you use a pseudonym, the name Scott, your patient Scott, and how Scott changed the trajectory of your life forever?
Yeah. Yeah, he really did. There are a few patients in the ICU that I do clearly and vividly remember. Scott, in air quotes, is one of them. And in the ICU, not everyone is dying. And Scott was one of those people. He did have a terminal diagnosis. He had some kind of terminal cancer that he was coming to us to have an operation, where once the operation was done, he would go on to get chemo and radiation and likely die from this disease. But they were hoping, 5, 7, 10 years from then. So it wasn't like he came into the hospital thinking he would die in the hospital. I know this because initially his surgery went well, and I got to know him and his husband, and they were lovely and funny and just wonderful, right? And he went off to the floor to leave the hospital eventually, where he started to have complications. He coded, which means he died, basically, and they brought him back. And then, just to keep a long story somewhat short, this happened to him multiple times over his a course of stay in the hospital. So most of the time he was back and forth from the ICU to the floor, and just things kept happening. And because I was like the initial nurse, I happened to be with him and his husband almost the whole time he was in the hospital, which was about 6 months, which is crazy. And it was just the first time I really had like formed a bond with a patient and their family. And I saw the trajectory of like him just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And none of us really talking about the fact that like he already had a terminal illness. He already, like, it just didn't go as planned. And the fact that he had been in the hospital for 6 months, he had multiple machines keeping him alive. The medications we had him on were killing his fingers and toes and nose, because there's certain medications we use to keep people's blood pressure up, which is amazing. But there's a risk for that. And the risk is we are pumping you full of vasoconstrictors, meaning medication that constricts your blood vessels. So the blood can't get to your extremities because it's trying to keep your heart pumping and like the blood flowing best it can. And it ends up, your extremities end up dying off. So there's just so many complications that you never even think of, even as a nurse, until you're doing it. So it just became a really, really dark, sad time for me that was like, I feel like this is not the answer. I feel like death is not the worst possible thing right now. And no one's talking about this. No one's being honest with what's actually happening. Anyway, so that was the first time in like my first 2 years of nursing where I finally spoke up. And I finally said to the group, because they do rounds, I think we need to have a family meeting to talk about next steps. I was very general. I just said next steps, whatever that meant. But everyone knew what that meant. And I just saw for the first time that I had a voice and that my voice mattered. And right when I said it, it was like everyone breathed a sigh of relief, even his husband. And we're kind of like, yes, let's have this meeting. And we had the meeting. And by the end of the day, we were honest with the husband, what was going on, what was likely to happen, which was he was likely not going to get out of here. And they turned the machines off. He turned the machines off, and he died that by the end of my shift. And even though that's what I felt was probably the best thing, it was the first time that had happened. And the first time it felt like someone died because of me, like because I spoke. So it was weird, like empowerment slash, whoa, what did I just do? And I remember sitting in my car being like, I feel like I just killed someone, but it also gave me this voice of like, but this was right. This was right. So it was a very weird, confusing time, but that was the start of me being like, if we're going to die, which we all are, there has to be a better way than what we're doing here in the ICU. Yeah. And I'll never forget it.
Were you scared? Were you thinking, during rounding, the physicians are there, all the caregivers are there. It's like a catch-up meeting. Were you scared that you were going to step on toes? Did you not care? Or what was going through your mind?
Oh, I was so scared because it was a teaching hospital too. So there are like world-renowned attendings attending the meeting, attending this rounds, right? With
Oh
all
boy.
the students, all the fellows, all the residents, all the nurses, the family. Like it's a big deal, and it happens every day. When you're, and that 2 years sounds like a lot of time, but like it's not as a nurse. So 2 years in, it was still like a big deal that I was even involved in the rounds. It felt like to me, so I was very, very scared. Now, all it took was a couple times doing that to be not scared and to be like, wait a minute, I'm a part of this team. I'm an important voice. And I really can, and like what I think matters, and I'm not wrong. Like, cause you fear being wrong. You fear being like, maybe I'm the only one thinking this. Maybe I'm not right. Maybe they know something I don't know. But the second I said something, I could tell immediately everyone had been thinking it. No one just said anything because it happened so quick. Everyone was like, yes, 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 get the social worker. Who's the social worker? And it happened that day. And that helped me see that like, oh, okay, I don't have to be so afraid. And people want to hear what I have to say. Not me. I mean, any nurse, the nurse has a voice is the point.
And the nurse knows.
And the nurse knows. The nurse knows. Yeah. And guess what? So does everybody else, including the family. His husband, as sad as it was, I think felt a little relief. Because It's really hard watching your loved one not be your loved one anymore for 6 months in a hospital bed, slowly changing. Like they know they don't want to be the one to say, when's what's going to happen, So I even saw it in him that he kind of knew and was relieved amongst other things, not just relieved, devastated as well. But
Well, you're doing counseling. In fact, even though you're not labeled a counselor, you're doing home palliative care, or you're an RN in hospice settings. And correct me if I've got that wrong.
I am that now. Yes. I
Okay, you're
wasn't that
that
then,
now.
but
That was an
yeah.
ICU nurse. That
Yeah.
was like so technology
Yeah.
and scientifically based at all times. But you're a de facto counselor when you're doing this other stuff. How do you comfort or help people who feel guilty that they're going to be relieved that their loved one is going to finally transition, when they say it's going to be a relief, but they feel guilty about it?
Yeah. I think I usually just try to normalize everything. So, for hospice, just so everyone knows, and palliative care, there are social workers, there are chaplains, and that's part of the team. So they are talking to the families too about different type of bereavement and different things that they may be feeling and thinking. I try to, as a nurse, educate about what's going to be happening or what they're seeing and why they're seeing it. That usually starts people, it gets them to talk anyway. So that's why they end up saying stuff like, when's this going to end? Like, I feel bad saying this, but like, how long can this go on? And that is when I really do just try to listen for the most part and validate people for how they're feeling, because I think there's complicated emotions in life, and I think we really are hard on ourselves when it comes to like anything that feels quote unquote bad. If it feels bad, I must be doing something wrong. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle this? Why can't So I always try to educate people and just validate that, like, this is what everyone's thinking and feeling. Everyone says this to me. And that makes them feel not so alone. The only thing I try to like not do things, right? So I try not to quote unquote make them feel better. Say little things like, just like, it's like everyone's so uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. So like someone's crying or saying they feel so uncomfortable, and instead of just being like, yeah, it's really hard. It is really uncomfortable. I usually say something like that versus like, don't feel uncomfortable. At least they live till 88, or like, at least you're doing a good job. I usually just try to validate how they're feeling. I don't try to like make them feel better.
Yeah,
Because I
that's
think that doesn't. I think it makes it feel not validated.
yeah, you would be gaslighting if you're just
Yeah.
going to cheer people up, and they
To
definitely don't.
cheer people up.
Yeah,
Yes. That's not
what
what they need.
why do we have to cheer people up around death? This is one of the human experiences that is like the ultimate. It's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I believe that we come here, is to have the love and the bittersweetness of the temporary separation
Mm.
that physical death really is. But when you're in it, I mean, I'm gonna bawl my eyes out when my mom transitions. She's in her 80s. But even though I know where we're going, I know we'll be together again, that's because I'm gonna allow myself to be a normal human being.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, when did you lose your fear of death? I'm not saying you welcome death.
Yeah.
Nobody really it does usually, but at what point in your career did you decide it's okay when I die?
I feel like I've always felt like that. Honestly, I think I've kind of always felt like that. But I really started really contemplating it, I suppose, once I became like an ICU nurse to a hospice nurse. It developed over time. And now I still wouldn't say like I have no fear over death. I think it's because I'm human. So like if I got diagnosed with something terminal tomorrow, I would still have the human experience of like having, intermittent waves of fear and sadness and anger and confusion, right? So I'd still have like those moments. And I could let the fear get away from me, right? Where I like indulge in this fear. But like I have a center in me that I'll try to articulate, but it's like a center feeling where it's like I can come back to this place of knowing that there's nothing to fear. Hence my book. I always say if the book wasn't called Nothing to Fear, it'd be called Normal to Fear. I fought for that title. I fought for that title a little bit, which I lost. But because it is normal. So it's like normal to fear, but I always come back to the center place of knowing that I don't have to. And at the lowest, like on the lowest level to explain nothing, it's like I don't have to, because at the end of the day, I think which I don't actually believe this, but at the worst case scenario, I suppose, would be like you lose consciousness and that's it. And like it doesn't matter because you think it's going to be scary, but really your consciousness is not there. Think about before you were born. If I think about 1970, I don't feel afraid because I didn't exist then. I didn't know anything about it, right? So I feel like that actually helps me. So even if there is nothing, because at the end of the day, I don't truly know. It's not like I don't know. I think I do, but that's just my belief. And at the best case scenario, which is what I believe, is that I'm going to go to a place that feels more like home than here ever has.
Yeah, and I'll challenge your belief that you think you know. You do know. We have about 20 decades of afterlife research that tells us that consciousness survives the physical death, and you've had the experiences that tell you that, and you've also had experiences seeing some of the helpers that are unseen in the room. Would you mind sharing one of those above the norm sort of experiences that you've had?
I have a story that I told for many years called my miracle story, which I feel like I witnessed a miracle. And I told that story a lot, but I didn't tell like the other part of the story. So I had a woman who was actively dying when I saw her on admission, which means to me, it looked like she would die that night. So it was a late admission. And in all honesty, I was a little annoyed that I was like, like work was making me do this late admission. But then when I got there and she was arriving from the hospital in an ambulance, I saw her kids get out of their car and they were young. They were like 20. And I was like, oh, my heart was like breaking. And she was really young, and when I saw her, I could tell, oh, shoot, this lady is going to be, this is the person who's going to die while I'm here. Like, this is how imminent this is. And I could tell her kids didn't know what was going on because her kids were like talking to me about like physical therapy and like when's she going to start eating. And they did not know that their mom was dying. So I got their mom comfortable, and then I started talking to them about end of life and what I was seeing and how I could tell that their mother would die that night, and they need to call people if they need to call people, and like I'll stay here as long as I can, blah 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 blah. So probably like an hour passed, and I kept like waiting because I kept thinking this lady is going to die any minute, and her poor kids like are not ready. So I just want to sit here because I'm going to leave, and she's going to die, and then we're going to have to come back anyway. And she was like, just to get everyone an image of like what this was, she was cyanotic, which means blue. There's no way her blood was oxygenating enough to like feed oxygen to her brain. Like she was definitely brain dead. She was like, that's how close she was to death. This was not like, there was no way she was like mentating or getting oxygen anywhere to her body to actually survive this.
Right. Okay, we're with you.
Yeah. So anyway, I ended up having to leave because it was too long of a time. It was getting late. So I told the kids, like, listen, your mom is very comfortable. I can tell you don't have to do much. Just be here with her. Call us when she dies. She will likely die tonight. And you just call us and we'll come back out. So I go home, I go to bed. I'm thinking about them. And really quick though, before I did leave that house, I went back to the room just to like check on her to like make sure she was okay so the kids could like be comfortable. I checked on her. I left. I went home. I was like thinking about them being like, oh God, please like have everything be okay and like have it be comfortable and everyone be okay. The next morning, I'm like looking through emails to be like, who went out to do the death visit? And there was no email. So I called the office being like, which nurse went out to go do the death visit? Like this patient died. And they were like, no one called for a death visit. I was like, what? Like, then I'm thinking like, oh God, the family called the hospital. Like they probably went to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. So I called the house. The son answers. He sounds happy. I hear laughing in the background. And he's like, oh, hey, Julie. Yeah, things actually went okay last night. Mom slept really well. Mom slept really well. And she got up this morning and said she was hungry and wanted pancakes. And I was just like, I could not hold my shock. I was like, what? What? And he's like, Mom's up eating pancakes. And I could hear them laughing with her daughter in the kitchen. And I was somewhat professional and was just like, that's great. I'm going to come right over because I could not believe what I was hearing. So I went over there and sure enough, there she is, fully alert, awake, oriented, walking, talking, eating pancakes like she was not just dead, because maybe she was breathing at the time when I left there, but like she was not there. Like she was gone. This is not something you can come back from. There's also a thing called the surge or the rally. It's called terminal lucidity, where someone gets a burst of energy and then dies shortly after. That is not how the rally should look. Someone should not be that close to death to be able to rally. But I did think to myself in that moment, this must just be a really insane rally where like I've never witnessed something like this before. So I did, of course, bearer of bad news again, tell the family that like this could be the rally. She might die shortly after. Like, let's just appreciate the time we have together, yada, yada. And of course, that was wrong too. This woman ended up living basically normally for the next 3 months. Which still is like, some people might think that's not long, but it's like, no, this is literally a true miracle. I witnessed a miracle with my own eyes. Someone was like brain dead and not coming back and has fully come back to life for 3 months. So I told that story. That's an amazing story in its own. I told that story for years because I couldn't believe I witnessed a miracle.
Yeah, but there's a lot more there,
There's
isn't
a lot more that I didn't say because I was too shy. So I even get shy now. Can you tell? I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, because it's so out of the norm. You're a
Yeah,
scientist at heart. This is
yeah.
what drew you to medicine, is you wanted to help heal people, but you wanted to do it through materialist science.
It's still hard for me to be like, okay, but really. So that night before I left the house, when I went in that one last time to go see her, just to make sure she was okay, I did close my eyes and say a little prayer to whatever it is that's out there, being like, just watch over her, blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, something flashed in my head, basically showing me this vision and it happened in a split second, right? So in this split second, the vision showed and told me that like I'm her angel. I'm taking care of her. This is mine. That's like the exact wording. This is mine. She was this. So this is mine. And it was like as big as a car, like huge. Like if a car was like on its rear heels or whatever, it was like huge. It was huge and cream looking. And I do feel like it felt like it had wings, but like you couldn't see them. It was like behind them. It felt like a big cream statue, huge, that was like leaning over her. It didn't feel like loving, but it didn't feel scary. It just felt like powerful. And as quickly, it was very quick. It was like, this is mine. And it felt like there was nothing I could have done. It didn't matter. It wasn't not concerned about me, but it was showing me that like, this is mine. I've got this kind of thing. And it happened very quickly. And of course I am not, it's not, I guess I am skeptical because I just don't feel confident enough to be like, and that's for sure what happened. Right. Once I even happened to me, I literally put it out of my head and thought, that's my mind making this up. That's what I thought. And then the next morning when I came back and she was like fully alive and lived for another 3 months, I did think, oh, maybe this is not my mind making this up. Maybe I did actually see that. And then even then, it still took me years to actually say anything to people. And even now when I say it, I still have a hard time saying it to people because I'm afraid of what people will think, I guess.
I would offer that maybe it's just outside of your sphere of what you do, because literally you're following science and you're looking
Yeah.
at the signs of your patient and how things track, and you have all this experience, so you know that not every death process is exactly alike, but there are things that they have in common, so you know what to anticipate. This is outside of your sphere of anticipation.
Yeah.
It's outside of your sphere of experience, but yet you're doing the right thing by sharing it, because there's a ripple effect, Nurse Julie. Everything that you share, and you have so many wonderful videos on social media, YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, where you share these little vignettes of things you've experienced. I feel like that's why they're given to you,
Yeah.
is you'll do it. And so I think the moment that you lose that little bit of discomfort is the moment probably when you're retired from nursing, because you got to stay in the science head, you know? So
Yeah.
I think it all really kind of makes sense to me. So I got to ask you a very current events type of question.
Yeah.
President Jimmy Carter. I know that your DMs have blown up really big about people
Yeah.
saying, what the heck?
Yeah.
This is October 4th, 2024. He hasn't passed. He just turned 100. His beautiful wife passed recently. And I think some of those people, because I've gotten a few messages myself, they're like, why are they keeping him alive? Why don't they have him on a feeding tube, an NG tube or something?
Oh.
Why does he look so bad? And this freak out. What kind of things are people asking you about him, and how are you answering those questions?
Most people are asking, like they'll see the videos and they'll see how he looks. And of course, they feel alarmed because no one knows what end of life looks like. So, oh my gosh, look at him. And then it goes to, why would the family do this? Why would the family put him on display like this? He wouldn't, like, this is undignified. That's where I get like really fired up. This is not undignified. This man was a family man who was clear about what he wanted his end of life to look like, hence why he went onto hospice so early. Thank you very much. He didn't wait. Now, granted, he was very, very elderly, but he did have a terminal diagnosis of some kind of melanoma. And he didn't wait for it to get so bad. He went on hospice right away. He was very clear on what he wanted. He was very clear on how he wanted to die. He loved being around his friends and family. And they're not going to hide him away just because he's been 100 years old and doesn't look like we think someone should look. And so it's like, we need to get used to, I know. People are like, why would they do this? This is so undignified. What?
I'm like,
That he's old?
I'm pantomiming cheering in my chair
Yes.
hearing this, because this stigma of death being so ugly and something to be locked away in some
Yes.
room in the back of the house and not discussed. And just the word dead and dying and death, it conjures up all of this goosebumps and fear, and people's stomachs churn. And it's a part of life. I feel like he's setting an example yet.
He's setting exactly yet again, he's setting this example of like how to live out the rest of your life, even when it's getting towards the end. He has an end of life journey just like anybody else. And I think he's showing us a beautiful example, him and his family, because he likely is, like I said, I just made a video about it. He likely is sleeping 22 hours a day, right? So why is he in that wheelchair, leaned back with his mouth open and eyes closed at his own 100-year birthday party? Because he's end of life and he's 100 years old. And that's how someone looks. And they can look like that and still be okay. He's like that because he's likely super relaxed. He's super relaxed. His body's
not digesting food. He's not getting gas or anything like that. He can literally just transition slowly and peacefully.
And our bodies know how to do it. And someone else said, like, why don't they put in a feeding tube? Why don't they do like I do nutrition? So one, he probably has already put in his advanced directives. He wouldn't want that. So that's probably why. And two, even if he didn't, his family probably is listening to his healthcare providers who said, this is not the time for that, because people need to understand that, like, you can't keep people alive forever. And even if we put in a feeding tube, and Jimmy Carter or whoever, anyone dying, a feeding tube or TPN, which is like nutritional, IV nutrition, it's not going to do what it would do for someone who has a healthy body. Someone who has a healthy body and isn't going to die, those things will help and will help you get better and improve. Someone who has a dying body, it's just going to make you worse because your body will not work. Your body has already said, hey, I'm shutting down. This is not happening. You can do whatever you want, but it's just going to make it worse. And usually what it does is cause fluid overload, it turns into respiratory distress, or they can't tolerate the tube feed, so they get aspiration pneumonia because they end up regurgitating it because their body says no. So they are doing exactly what his body needs, and I am here for it. I'm here for it.
That's very helpful, hopeful, and healing for people to hear and for people to see that. What about those people that are so afraid of their own deaths? I hear people say, what if it really is just lights out, it's all over. And so they write up all these directives, keep me alive at all costs. And we even go to this extreme of people having their head detached from their body after physical death and having it frozen, falsely thinking that their consciousness, which is non-local, that it's in their brain somehow, it can be reanimated. Is there anything that, from your experience, that you think that you can say or point out to people that are that scared?
So I think the first thing I always say is it's normal to be that afraid, I think. Maybe not. So I'll say two things. So one, it's normal to fear. Like I said, my book is called Nothing to Fear, but I do put a little caveat in there saying, it's really normal to fear. And the main thing that I see with people who are dying on hospice, I mean, we're all dying, but in hospice, at least we know they're kind of getting closer to death. Those people who are willing to talk about it, even in a way that says that when they say things like, I'm afraid to die, I don't want to die, I'm angry, I'm dying, they still seem to have some relief. There is something about speaking the truth about the fear. So if you are one of those people and you're really afraid of dying or you don't know what's going to happen next, talk about that. Speak about it. Don't resist it. Don't feel ashamed that you feel afraid. Like even my mom will say like, I shouldn't be afraid. And it's like, I think the shoulding really hurts us. We don't resist. I didn't say this, but whatever we resist persists, right? So let it out, get it out, say the truth. And the fear will likely come back intermittently, right? Back and forth, back and forth. But the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you become with that fear. Usually it dissipates even a little bit. And when fear dissipates, to me, you open yourself up to something new, right? There's some freedom in that can help you be open to other avenues of thought.
That's actually profound.
Thank you.
Allowing,
Yeah, allowing.
not fighting it, not pushing
Yeah.
it away and avoiding it.
Yeah.
That's big because it allows you to see with new eyes.
Yeah.
What do you say to these folks that they're so upset that they stayed with their loved one, they were there at hospice, and it's like the loved one just up and dies as soon as they leave to go home and sleep, or as soon as they go down the hall to get a cup of coffee. I hear it all the time.
Same. I hear that's what I say to them. When they're explaining this to me, I usually just try to normalize it. I'm like, I hear this all the time. And sometimes people want to be alone. And a lot of times I'll say, what was their personality like? Were they really independent? Were they prideful? Not in a bad way, but like in a like never changing in front of anybody or really fiercely independent. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, yes, they were like that. And if someone's like that, they usually do want to die alone. They usually don't want people to see them. And there's other ways too. Some people want everyone there and they will wait until everyone is in the room or in the house or in the state. They'll wait till that person comes in the room and says, I'm here. Like, it's okay, you can go. And literally they will die in that moment, right? So different personalities will do different things. And many people will wait till everyone goes to take their last breath.
It's almost like for some of them, it's easier to let go if they've had this nice visit and then everybody leaves, I think. And some of the souls that are giving us good evidence that it's really them, their consciousness continues in another plane, will actually say, hey, look, I couldn't go with all those people looking at me. Where somebody else says, I loved it that we were all singing to my favorite song and holding hands when I passed. So yeah, seems to be a personality thing, I guess. Well, I want to tell you why I'm so especially interested in the work that you do and why you're sharing it with the world speaks so dearly to my heart. My granddad worked in a ministry. Of course, he had a nice church. He was a Presbyterian minister, and I was like the preacher's kid, even though he was my grandfather. And as a child, I went to the nursing homes with him, and that was what we had for hospice in the
Mm-hmm.
60s, early 70s. That was hospice. And so I was around death all the time. And then when those folks died, I'd go to their funeral. He was presiding over their funerals. It was a very small town. And when we were in the nursing homes, I knew when somebody was going to die because there was a light flashing over their head. And
Wow.
that meant like next Saturday when we came or next Sunday when we came, they wouldn't be there. And it never failed. I saw a gentleman pass and walk through the door in spirit and notice me in my coloring in my coloring books and just kind of give me a little wave and walk down the hall and disappear. So, Julie, I thought this was normal. I thought, they're just leaving.
Yeah.
They're just leaving. There's some of them get to say goodbye, some don't. And then they would come to their funeral. I usually would see them at that. So this is all so normal. It was a
Wow.
shock to get in school as a child and find out how scared people were of death and how they really thought that was the end.
It's difficult for me because I don't witness it all the time. Like, you know how you said, and I don't want to speak for you, but like, it sounds like anyone I talk to that says they're a medium or says they see things or feels things, it sounds like, at least from what they say, that it happens like all the time for them, right? So like you walked in and you could see that there were like lights on people's heads and you could tell that they were going to die, and you saw that doesn't really happen for me, but every once in a while, weird stuff does. Right? So it's so hard to say like I am sensitive and I feel things because sometimes I don't, right? Sometimes I don't at all. Or if I had to try to, no, it wouldn't, right? It's only like every once in a while. I do think, generally speaking, I've always been someone who's been interested in things like this. And literally since I've been like 4 years old, or my first like conscious thought is me thinking about and talking to my mom about like, why are we here? What happens after we die? Like, what's going on? Like, I was always kind of like, what is going on here? Like, why are we here? And I did have little things when I was little happen to me that sound very, like I can remember, like I would always wake up in the middle of the night. I saw this Last Supper picture of my parents, like moving on the wall, things like that, like really inanimate things moving, right? I remember saying that like I could see like little creatures, like it wasn't distinctly like I see a dead man, but it was like I would see things that seemed not human though, right? Anyway, so like little things like that growing up. And
Yeah.
I've always been into kind of like what happens after we go. So that's always been in my life. And now just kind of being around death all the time and being so comfortable with it, I definitely get feelings. I don't see things much, but I get feelings. Like, to me, when I watch someone take their last breath, it's one of the most beautiful things I can witness, because it's not my loved one. This is not my mom. The grief is removed. So I think I can really feel it for what it is, which is beautiful. And it really reminds me of birth. So like when I watch a baby being born, I can, like, even if it's on video, I love watching it because I feel this like, um, I feel like home. That's what it feels like. I instantly like weep tears of joy, because it's like this baby is like, you're here, where'd you come from? And I kind of know instinctually where they came from, which was like this place that I've once been to. And it's so moving to me. And that is the same feeling I get when someone takes their last breath. It's like they're both on the cusp of like going back. And I almost feel a pain of jealousy. It almost feels like that. Like I want to go too. I want to be back there too, is what it feels like a
Like,
little bit.
take me with you, let me
Yeah.
see. And I know
Yeah.
I'm going back, but it's like, don't be homesick because I know I still have work to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I still can doubt. It's like I can doubt myself just because of who I am and what I do for a living. But generally speaking, it's like I know in my heart of hearts, but I never want to be someone who's going to like preach to other people that like I know and you should know too. Right. It's just sort of like, I'll tell you what I know. You can believe what you want to believe.
Yeah. because we don't know where somebody is on their journey, on their
Yeah.
path of understanding, and we're all in different places. One of them, I think the most instructive things that you show us is what end of life looks like the final hours. And it's so impressive that you have people that will give you a video
I know.
of their loved one in what is it called? The agonal breathing? Is that what
Yeah.
it's called?
Agonal breathing. Yep.
Yeah, and we see that, and we can see them reaching out and even maybe mumbling like they're talking to someone that they see that's there for them. It's, people trust you to tell the story. Like they want others to know, again, there's nothing to be afraid of here. Do you feel like you were born maybe to do this?
I don't feel like that. I don't feel like that. Maybe I am. And it does seem very serendipitous. I mean, this whole hospice nurse Julie thing has really felt like it just happened to me. Like there was no trying. So that makes me feel like, um, maybe I could be meant to do this. But even that, I kind of give over because it's kind of like, what is it? I didn't really try. I truly didn't have like an agenda. There was no planning. Like I knew I had a few things to say. Some things happened in my life that made it easier for me to be like, I should just say this. I should just do this. And within a few days, I had like 10,000 followers on TikTok. And then within a few months, I had 100,000. And then in a few more months, I had 1 million. Like it all just like happened. There was no like hustle. So it does feel very like serendipitous that something else is allowing this to happen. But I I have to say, I'm kind of someone who like hasn't really planned their life in general. So it doesn't feel like this is what I'm meant to be doing. It's just sort of like, here I am. Like things are just happening.
And you live in a really fast-paced area. You're in the Los Angeles
Yeah,
area, and I think you have a boyfriend.
I do. Yeah.
He's really funny and supportive of what
Oh
you
my
do too.
gosh, he's great. Yeah, he's in the other room
Yeah.
right
Oh,
now.
cool.
Yeah.
He's waiting for you. That's
Yeah.
cool. And he does cute little things for you. Then some of those that you share for us. It sounds like you're attracting, people talk about attracting, like attracts like, but you're also, I'm going back to a few things you said earlier that all go into allowing, like
Yeah.
not resisting a death process when it's inevitable. And so that leads me to the final topic that I really wanted to make sure that we covered. What is a good death? What are some of the characteristics of a good death that you speak of?
Preparedness is the number one thing. Being prepared and knowing and talking about the fact that it's happening will allow for a quote unquote good death. I think everyone's going to have their own idea of what what that means to them. I don't want to act like my idea of dying naturally at home is the good death. I want it to be whatever it is you think that is, but you need to talk about what you think that would look like for you and then do everything in your and we can't control when we die. We could be hit by a car and die that way. But I mean, like knowing what you'd want medically if something were to happen to you. So being prepared and talking openly and honestly, no matter how scary it is, about how you truly feel about the end of life and what you're wanting. That's the main thing. Start there. And if you can do that, it usually just unfolds as it should.
How
So we
about
just
like
need to
your
talk about
estate
it.
planning and things like that? Like I'll have people say, I can't die yet. I haven't finished all my estate planning and who's going to get what or whatever. I'm like, newsflash, we don't know.
Yeah, time is now. The time is, people
Yeah.
always say, even people on hospice, the family will go, when should I call family? I'm always like, call them now. You call them
Yeah.
now. Because like, what are we waiting for? Like you want to wait until the person's on, of course I say this with more compassion, obviously, but like, oh no, the time is now. Like, this is it. Like all hands on deck, because even if they're not dying yet, whatever that even means, right? I think people think there's going to be a moment of time and then we're all going to know. It's like, no, 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 no. This is how it feels and looks. It's very gray. It's very unknowing, which makes people be like, I don't know what to do. So just do it. You got to do the thing because it's not black and white. It's not obvious sometimes. So it's like the time is now. People should come now because don't wait until they are not waking up to call the family. And people will say, well, and I get it because we live in this world that is not meant to die. People are not, we live in a world where like no one's supposed to die. That's how our life works, I feel like. So it's like, yeah, but I have to get time off work. And if I take this week off, I can't take the next week off. And what if they live longer and I've already taken all my vacation days? And I get it. And 10 years from now, you're not going to be caring about that. 10 years from now, you're going to be like, oh, well, I had to take off 2 weeks work and I didn't get paid for a week. And like, that sounds really scary, but you will be happy you did if this is the person that you love the most and you want to be with them. So just do it.
Yeah,
Do the
I
thing.
recently had a friend in hospice, and a couple people were saying, "Well, I'll go later." It later did not happen, but I can tell you, I had an uncle. He's crossed over who was a hospice chaplain, and he said whenever he was with a family. And the person just seemed to not be letting go, but they were in at the end stage of death. He would say, who's not here? Who have they not seen or talked to on the phone? And people would come up with somebody and
Mhm.
he'd say, get them on the phone now and hold the phone out for them to say goodbye or I love you or whatever they wanted to say. Just hello, I'm here. And then the person would let go. They would let go pretty quickly after. And he said that happened so many times that he knew that we needed better preparation, that we
Yeah.
needed a better understanding of what it is to let go of the physical life here and move on
Yeah.
to our real home.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, this book, Nothing to Fear, is a really important book to do that because you're the boots on the ground.
Mhm.
Do you feel like, have you seen hundreds, thousands of passings? Do you know?
I definitely have had thousands of patients, but
Yeah.
actually seeing and witnessing the final breath, I would say 100 or less, because a lot of times you're not there for the final breath.
Wow.
But if I can be, I will, because like I said, I think it's like a sacred time that I feel lucky is the wrong word, but I can't think of a word right now, but I feel like lucky when I get to see that. It's like such a sacred, special moment.
Is there a final thought, Julie, that you want to make sure that you express to us, or some words that you want to leave us with?
There's so many things. The one thing I wanted to say really quick about the being there for someone's last breath. This is not like a final thought, but it's just a story that I love sharing because I think it's so
Right.
beautiful and it could have gone so differently. And
Yeah.
it plays to the fact of like people being ready and understanding what's happening. I was seeing a patient, just a random, not a random patient, but a random follow-up visit. Like nothing was like going on with this patient. They were dying, but not intimately. And I was just going to see how they were doing. And I was there and I was thinking like, what a lovely family. It was him and his wife and a couple of his kids and grandkids. And they were all just like hanging out, talking, laughing. And I was like charting and doing other things. And I was getting ready to leave when suddenly they were like, oh, he looks a little different. And I went in and something had happened, whatever it is, right? His body decided to let go in that moment where he really swiftly changed on a dime. He was awake and talking, getting close to death, but nothing that I would say like he would die soon. To being actively dying, to being he's gonna die like today. Changes in breathing, fully unconscious. That could be really scary for anyone, even with the nurse there. And the family, instead of freaking out and being like, "What happened? What happened? Tell us what happened." I just said, I don't know what's going on, but his body suddenly changed. And I do think he's going to die soon. So I'm glad you guys are here. Let's get together. Everyone be with him. And that family just switched their framework. The wife got in bed with him. The kids surrounded him. They didn't hush the grandkids out, but let the grandkids in there still playing, still joking and laughing. And the wife just started saying things like, thank you for loving me. You're so easy to love. The kids were like, bye, dad, we love you. Like kissing, just letting him go. It makes me want to weep, cry, like just thinking about it now. It was like the most beautiful end of life I've ever seen someone. And I was there till he took his last breath. And it was so beautiful. And I thought, I am so grateful that this family allowed me to be here, allowed me to witness how easily they transitioned from laughing with their dad a moment ago to him taking his last breath and just loving him and letting his body go. It was so beautiful. And it's those types of death that I'm like, I want people to have this type of death. This is available to people if they are willing and able to prepare, talk about it, and like kind of like let go and be in the moment. They could have lost that moment. They really could have, because he was going to go either way, right? Like it was like if they freaked out and tried to do a bunch of things, it's not like he would have survived, right? They just would have missed the moment.
That's amazing. And I'll bet that family knew, don't just jump up and run out of the room after he passes either.
Yeah.
Sit with them. So you all just kind of let it just be.
Yeah. It was really beautiful.
That's
really
cool.
Beautiful.
That's what we all deserve if we can have it.
Yeah, right.
The book is Nothing to Fear: Demystifying Death to Live More Fully. A very important tagline here.
Yeah.
Julie McFadden, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being on Carefree and Conscious.
Thank you for having me.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media @carefreemedium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.